The studio lights were relentless, exposing every shadow and flicker of emotion to the global stage. Kristi Noem sat poised with her trademark smirk, sharp as a weapon, while Ibrahim Traoré faced her with unshaken composure, his posture firm and eyes unwavering. The debate had barely begun when Kristi leaned into her microphone, her voice dripping with condescension. "You know, President Traoré, we civilized leaders like you. Without guidance from countries like mine, you'd still be chasing progress with a stick." A collective gasp rippled through the audience as cameras captured the smug curve of her lips and the sudden narrowing of Traoré's eyes. He let the silence stretch, her words hanging heavy like dust before a storm. Before replying in a calm but cutting tone, "Civilize me. You couldn't even civilize yourselves." The studio froze. Even the moderator faltered, forgetting the next question. Kristi's smirk wavered for a heartbeat before she laughed it off, as though his rebuttal were beneath her. But Traoré wasn't joking. His words were deliberate, sharpened like a blade, leaning forward with quiet resolve. He carried the weight of someone who had endured coups, sanctions, and foreign plots, a man immune to the cheap power of a smirk. In the control room, producers whispered excitedly, knowing this exchange would be the viral moment. Regaining her posture, Kristi straightened and cloaked herself once more in her smirk. Her voice honeyed as she said, "Relax. It's not personal, it's reality. Countries like yours talk about sovereignty because you can't manage accountability. When the lights fade and the cameras leave, it becomes chaos, corruption, coups, collapse, and we step in to stabilize, because that's what adults do," Kristi declared, drawing a few uneasy chuckles from the audience as the moderator forced a polite smile, silently pleading for civility. Traoré didn't blink. "You confuse intervention with maturity," he replied evenly. "You call it stabilizing, when it's really centralizing your influence, your contracts, your comfort." Kristi leaned forward, elbows on the desk, her smirk tightening. "Oh, spare me the poetry. You wanted roads, hospitals, ports. Who funded them? Who trained your officers? Who kept your markets from collapsing? People like me." Traoré's hands remained folded as his voice cut through with calm precision. "People like you sent consultants with clipboards and left with minerals. You kept receipts for the aid, but none for what you took. You built ports that led outward, not inward. Roads that connect mines to borders, not farmers to markets. Trainings that teach obedience, not ownership." The studio fell silent, the air taut until the moderator tried to steer things back. "Governor Noem, perhaps we can focus on policy specifics." Kristi interrupted sharply. "Here's a specific: your economy survives on donors. Your security on foreign hardware. Don't come on American TV and preach independence with borrowed microphones." Traoré turned toward the camera, as though addressing viewers at home instead of the opponent across from him. "Independence is not the absence of trade, it is the presence of dignity. It means we choose our partners without asking permission from those who think partnership is permission." Kristi laughed, short and sharp. "You're good at speeches, but speeches don't fill stomachs." "They do," Traoré countered, quietly. "When they change contracts, they do. When young people stop believing humility means silence, they do." A hush spread. In the front row, a student lowered her phone, her eyes bright, while in the control room, a producer whispered, "We're watching a narrative flip in real time." Kristi leaned in for one last jab. "Be honest, if you had our money and our military, you'd do exactly what we do." Traoré shook his head. "If I had your money and your military, the first thing I would buy is less arrogance." A ripple of gasps swept the room, followed by a stifled laugh, while the moderator swallowed hard. Traoré's voice softened, almost kind. "Kristi, you called this reality. Here's another. My people do not wake up wanting to be managed by strangers with confident voices. They want clean water, fair prices, safe roads, honest deals. That requires respect more than rescue." This time, Kristi's smirk didn't hold it cracked. Shall we talk specifics? Traoré added. Or will we keep pretending condescension is a policy? Adjusting her blazer and crossing one leg over the other, Kristi forced composure. Let's talk specifics. You want respect. Earn it. Nations earn respect by building, producing, and contributing, not by lecturing the people who pay the bills. The audience murmured, divided between agreement and disapproval, before Traoré spoke again, his tone calm and deliberate. You assume the bills you pay are charity. They are investments with interest rates no African bank would dare impose. You fund projects because they serve your supply chains, not our sovereignty. Kristi tilted her head, feigning confusion. Supply chains. That's just trade. You make it sound sinister. It becomes sinister, Traoré replied, when trade is disguised as aid. When the handshake hides a chain, you call it partnership, but the terms are written in your language, with your lawyers, in your courts, and when we resist, you call us unstable. The room fell silent, the moderator leaning in, sensing the gravity of the moment. Kristi broke it, with a sharp laugh. You're romanticizing this. Do you think the world runs on goodwill? Every country puts itself first? You think you'd be different? Traoré looked directly at her. Yes, because putting yourself first does not require putting others beneath you. For the first time, Kristi's eyes flickered not with doubt, but with discomfort as she tried to steer the conversation back to safer ground. All right, let's get practical, Kristi pressed. What do you actually have to offer the world, without leaning on powers like us? Traoré smiled faintly. Dignity. Resources we choose to trade, not surrender. Youth who no longer need to leave their homeland to find a future. And perhaps most dangerous to your worldview, a generation that believes the world does not revolve around you. The smirk she had worn so confidently now looked like a mask slipping from her face. And what, Traoré continued, do you offer the world without us? Think carefully before you answer. Her silence lingered louder than any rebuttal until she straightened, trying to reclaim composure. We offer stability, she said at last, her tone clipped. We offer the framework for a functioning world order. Without leaders like us, chaos would reign. Leaning forward, the light catching the edge of his uniform, Traoré answered. Chaos, you say. Look around, Governor. The chaos you speak of exists now in wars you fund, in debts you design, in borders you drew with a ruler across lands you never lived in. The crowd murmured as cameras zoomed in on Kristi's face, her confident veneer beginning to crack. You speak of a world order, Traoré went on, but whose order is it? A system where your economies thrive because ours are kept just strong enough to serve you, but never strong enough to compete with you. Kristi forced a brittle smile. So now you're the revolutionary philosopher. That's cute. But, let's be real, you wouldn't even be here without our infrastructure, our investments. She stopped as his steady gaze locked onto hers. Without your permission, he finished. Governor, if you believe my presence here is a gift from you, then you've already proven my point. A low wave of applause rippled through the audience as Kristi's jaw tightened. You claim to civilize leaders like me, Traoré continued, his voice unwavering. But the truth is, you couldn't even civilize yourselves. Your history is filled with conquest and division, yet you lecture others about unity and progress. The moderator glanced nervously between them. The atmosphere had shifted. This was no longer a polite debate, it was a public dismantling. Kristi opened her mouth to respond, but Traoré wasn't finished. Here's the truth, Governor. The world you describe is ending. The narrative you defend is losing its grip, and the future will not be built in rooms where one side enters with chains, while the other is told to be grateful. The silence that followed crackled with electricity. Kristi's eyes narrowed, her smirk returning forced, but still there. Strong words, Captain. But words don't grow economies. They don't build roads. And they certainly don't keep countries safe from enemies. Traoré folded his hands, calm yet unyielding. And yet, Governor, words are exactly what your leaders have used for decades to keep us in place. Promises of aid, promises of development, promises of democracy, always with conditions, always with strings. His hand shifted slightly, toward the audience. You've turned assistance into a leash. You call it support, but it's a trade, our sovereignty for your funding. Kristi tilted her head, voice sharp. That's the price of playing in the real world. No, Traoré countered. That's the price you demand for entry into your world. But we are building a new one where nations like mine don't have to beg permission to feed our people, defend our borders, or speak our truth. A man in the front row leaned forward, captivated. This was no longer sparring but a clash of visions. Kristi scoffed. You think you can bypass the systems that hold the world together? You think you can break away without consequence? Traoré's voice deepened, steady as stone. Governor, I don't think it. I know it. Because every time your system has failed us, we have survived. And survival breeds a strength you cannot imagine. The moderator, sensing her frustration, tried to intervene. Let's move to the topic of global cooperation. But Kristi cut in sharply. No, I want to hear this. Tell me, Captain, what happens when your so-called independence runs dry? When your self-sufficiency collapses under its own weight? Traoré met her gaze without blinking. Then we rebuild again, without you. The words hung in the air like a challenge, and everyone knew Kristi had no easy rebuttal. She shifted in her seat, her smirk sharpening into something brittle. Without us. You talk as if America is a burden. Without our markets, our technology, our security networks, you'd be isolated within weeks. Traoré leaned forward slightly, his tone calm but cutting. Governor, isolation is when you have no one. We have each other, our neighbors, our regions, our people. What you call isolation, I call freedom from interference. A ripple of murmurs swept through the audience, and Kristi's glance betrayed the weight of their shifting attention. You think your alliances in Africa can match the scale of what we provide? She pressed. You can't build satellites. You can't manufacture jet fighters. We can grow our own food, Traoré interrupted steadily. We can secure our own land. We can make decisions without asking permission from a capital thousands of miles away. And when the need comes for satellites and jet fighters, we'll build them too, 'cause necessity is the mother of innovation. Kristi let out a sharp laugh. That's a nice slogan, but reality is harsh enough to crush dreams like yours. Dreams. Traoré's voice rose not in anger, but in power. Governor, we are not dreaming. We are building. It is your vision that's fading, not ours. For decades, your influence was unshakable. Now you're here, arguing with me, because you feel the ground shifting beneath your feet. The moderator's brows lifted at the force of the words, while Kristi crossed her arms defensively. You sound awfully confident for a man whose country's GDP is smaller than some of our counties. Traoré smiled faintly. Confidence doesn't come from GDP, Governor. It comes from knowing that every step we take is ours, not borrowed, not dictated, not bought. And with that, the room erupted in applause. Kristi waited for it to fade, but the sound lingered, feeding Traoré's quiet confidence. When she finally spoke, her voice dripped with condescension. Let's be honest, Captain, your people look up to leaders like me. We've set the standard. Without our example, you'd still be in the dark. Traoré didn't flinch. The dark, Governor, is believing the world begins and ends with you. The dark is thinking leadership means making others dependent so you can feel important. A camera flash caught Kristi's narrowing eyes as the tension between them grew electric. You talk about independence like it's some magic cure, she shot back. But your markets rely on foreign buyers, your roads rely on foreign aid, and your stability relies on foreign deterrence. Cut those strings, and the whole thing collapses. Traoré clasped his hands, posture unshaken. And yet every empire that believed others couldn't live without it eventually fell. Rome, Britain, and yes, one day even yours. We are not cutting strings, Governor. We are weaving our own fabric. The moderator leaned in. Governor Noem, would you say you see President Traoré's vision as unrealistic? Absolutely, Kristi replied instantly. It's romantic, not realistic. Traoré turned to the moderator. Romantic? No, I have seen mothers bury children because policies made far away valued resources over lives. I have seen farmers sell their harvest for pennies while corporations carried the profit overseas. That is not romance, it is injustice, and I will spend my life ending it. For the first time, Kristi had no quick retort, and the silence in the hall made the moment heavier. She leaned back, forcing a smirk she no longer fully felt. You speak as if you're the first leader to want change, but change without power is just noise. Traoré tilted his head slightly, studying her. Then you've mistaken the source of power, Governor. Power does not come from military might or economic leverage. It comes from the will of the people who stand behind you, and my people aren't for sale. The audience reacted instantly, some with murmurs, others with applause. Kristi's jaw tightened. So you're saying, she countered, that you don't need alliances with stronger nations? That you'll just stand alone? Traoré's eyes locked on hers. Alone? No, but I will never kneel for an alliance. Partnership? Yes. Never. The moderator sensed the charged air. Governor Noem, do you think President Traoré's refusal to follow established global structures is dangerous? Kristi seized the opening. It's reckless. Without a guiding hand, nations like his will be swallowed by larger forces. Traoré cut in, his voice calm but edged. The larger forces you speak of are exactly why we must walk our own path. Your guiding hand has too often been a closed fist. The line landed like a blow. A few in the audience even gasped. Kristi blinked, caught off guard as the cameras zoomed in, capturing the first cracks in her composure. Shifting in her seat, she leaned forward, as if proximity could restore control. You talk about fists, President Traoré, but sometimes a firm grip is what keeps chaos from spreading. His reply came without hesitation, steady and sharp, and sometimes that grip is on someone else's throat. The words hung in the air, heavy, forcing even the moderator to pause before finding his place again. Kristi tried to laugh it off, a brittle chuckle that rang hollow. So you think the world should just let every nation do whatever it wants? No rules, no leadership. Traoré folded his hands, gaze unwavering. There is a difference between leadership and control. Leadership inspires. Control demands. I choose inspiration. The audience erupted in a mix of applause and murmurs, the sound swelling until Kristi's smile grew tighter. She knew now this wasn't just about debate, it was about optics, and she was losing the room. Traoré's voice softened, but his resolve was unshaken as he continued. If your leadership were so perfect, Governor, you wouldn't need to convince the world it works. The results would speak for themselves. Kristi's lips parted, as if to respond, but nothing came. The cameras caught every second of her hesitation, and somewhere in the back row a journalist scribbled the moment down. Noem silenced. This was no longer a clash of words but a battle of presence, and Traoré was winning. By the time the debate neared its close, the atmosphere had shifted completely. What began as Kristi's confident attempt to belittle him had become in dismantling condescension, without ever raising his voice. The moderator offered each participant a final minute for closing remarks. Kristi went first, her tone more defensive than before. I believe in order. I believe in guiding nations that need direction. That's what strong leadership is about, she said, glancing at Traoré, as though hoping to provoke one last reaction. He waited for the applause to fade, then leaned into the microphone. Strong leadership is about respecting the sovereignty of others. It is about believing people can shape their own destiny without being molded into someone else's image. He paused, scanning the audience. Governor Noem believes in civilizing leaders like me. But perhaps it is time some leaders looked in the mirror before deciding who needs civilizing. The crowd erupted applause that was not only loud, but sustained, carrying the unmistakable verdict of who had won. Kristi kept her eyes fixed on her notes, her smirk replaced by a tight, unreadable mask. As the debate ended, cameras followed Traoré as he walked off stage, shaking hands and exchanging quiet words with audience members. By morning, the headlines would be unanimous. Traoré turned insult into victory, leaving Noem speechless. This wasn't just his win, it was a statement heard far beyond the debate hall. Proof that dignity, delivered with precision, could dismantle arrogance before the eyes of the world. Tonight, we didn't just debate policies, he declared. We debated respect. Leadership is not about standing above others, dictating how they should live, or claiming to civilize them. Leadership is about standing beside people, understanding their struggles, and building solutions together. Governor Noem, you believe strength comes from shaping others in your image. I believe strength comes from empowering people to walk their own path. My people do not need to be taught dignity, they already have it. They do not need to be given freedom, they were born with it. To everyone watching tonight, both in my country and across the world, remember this: your culture, your values, your dreams, these are not flaws to be corrected by others, but the foundation of your identity. Defend them, and no one will ever own you. I will continue to lead by the same principle that brought me here. We do not kneel to arrogance. We do not bow to condescension. We stand, we speak, and we decide for ourselves.